In this episode of the Second Swing of Thoughts podcast, we're breaking down all things U.S. Open at Oakmont. JJ Spaun with a pretty spectacular win. We also bring in Jake Montgomery to go through a deeper dive on the clubs that Spaun used and some of the specs and why some of those clubs are working really well in the fitting bays in 2025. So, again, big-time U.S. Open recap episode of the Second Swing of Thoughts podcast coming your way. Hey golfers, and welcome back to the Second Swing Thoughts podcast. Sean Bauer with me, co-host of the show here in the studio. And what a spectacular weekend of golf that we had at the U.S. Open at Oakmont. We had every weather condition that you could probably have. You had all kinds of styles of golf being played. You had, the best players in the world looking like amateurs in some cases with that rough. I thoroughly enjoyed every moment I got to watch of this tournament.
Yeah, it was nice to kind of have an old school U.S. Open, kind of what you watched back in the day. Some of these courses of late, whether it's just been due to conditions wise or it's a new course, they just haven't brought you that around even par winning score. Watching guys almost lose their mind because it's such a grind. So it was really, really fun to watch. Sunday there was at one point there was probably about 15 guys who had a shot at winning, once Burns and Adam Scott kind of came back down to the pack. And so that was riveting. You had the weather delay, so then you had to sit there and wait on it. And yeah, you couldn't have asked for a more entertaining tournament. And I know we always, sometimes you like the big names to win, but it was cool to see, maybe not the biggest name, but a guy who's been playing some really good golf this year, JJ Spaun, come out with a win, and what a cool way to cap it off.
Yeah, I appreciate what you said about the having not a huge name win, because last 4 or 5 majors we've had Scheffler, McIlroy, Xander Schauffele, Bryson DeChambeau. You have all these huge names winning, and now we get again, it wasn't, to me it didn't make it less exciting or anything like that, but it's cool to see a guy that really had to grind through the mini tours and Korn Ferry Tour, and someone that elevated their game to each level like that versus some of these guys that are studs and phenoms immediately. And that's not to discredit the journey that they had, but it's really cool to see a guy like Spaun really thrive in the moment the way he did. But you're right. This is, there really was 10 to 15 guys there at about, I guess, what was it our time? Probably 4:30 Central Time, 4 or 4:30 Central Time on Sunday afternoon that had a chance to win this tournament. And to see guys like MacIntyre, who had like 5 shots shown on TV all day, and all of a sudden he's just finished in the clubhouse at 1 over, and you're like, this guy could win the tournament. So awesome tournament, because so many of the majors lately have been like on Sunday it's really 2 or 3 guys that have a chance, and this was a really refreshing to see that a multitude of players were in it down the stretch, and again lots of different styles of golf too that we got to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I think it had to be since Brian Harman, Wyndham Clark were probably the last 2 now big names. Obviously, once you win, you move up and you become a name. But I'd say those are probably the last 2 major champions that weren't everyone knows this golfer or the considered the top golfers. And then and the thing that made this great and was because at any moment a guy could double bogey a hole, right? Yep. It was, if you miss your tee shot into a certain part of the rough, like you're on 9 there and you go into that, it was a hazard, but it was mainly just a really deep rough and fescue and whatnot. You go in there, you're probably dropping, so then you're hitting 3, and that's a long par 4.
Yeah.
So you're scrambling to hopefully get a bogey. But yeah, it was awesome. It's what the U.S. Open should be. It should be all about precision in all aspects of your game. I think with all this, focus on driving the ball so far, and it obviously strokes gained will show you that driving the ball further is better for you, but ultimately it was nice to see a course that made you not only you had to hit it far, but you had to hit it straight. Because if you were in that rough, you weren't getting it to the green. You were punching out and then having to use your wedge, right? So I like that challenge. I don't want to see that every week. But one time a year, give me that, and I'll sit back and enjoy it.
And I love how Spaun mentally, I appreciate the guys, and this is kind of why I've sort of liked Brooks over the years when he's been winning majors, is there's no emotion on his face, especially when he's in the thick of majors. He's just stoic. And Spaun is the same way this week, where he started with 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, I think, to start his day. He was 5 over through 6. And a lot of people, myself included, wrote him off because how do you respond after that in a U.S. Open? And he was patient. He let the game come to him. He let the opportunities, present themselves, and he took advantage of them on the back 9 to come back with 32 on the back and then hit those 2 tee shots on 17 and 18 the way he did. 17, I mean, that's an iconic shot that's going to go down in history. The tee shot on there, and he almost made it off the tee.
Kind of reminded me of Colin Morikawa's drive. It was at Olympic.
Yeah.
When he won his first major, where he just stepped up and hit it. And,
the PGA there.
Put it on the green. And, that shot was incredible. And to bounce back from one of the most unlucky bounces.
Yes.
On the second hole there, if that ball doesn't hit the pin, it's, a really good look at birdie right off the bat. And instead, it hits off the pin, comes all the way down the hill, and he ends up bogeying. Kind of reminded me of Tiger. Remember, was it?
Yeah.
On 15 at Augusta that one time when he was kind of in the hunt on Friday.
Yep.
And then hits the pin with his approach, and it rolls into the water, and that kind of derailed Tiger. It was nice to see Spaun.
You could have put some like Curb Your Enthusiasm music to it as the ball's rolling back down.
I know. And they just kept that shot on that ball forever. I was like, at least give us zoom out a little bit so we can see it. It was like, no, he was just this close up of the ball rolling. But
that's a crazy bad break. And then he got he made a couple really long putts on the back 9.
Yeah.
But
that birdie on that par 5, obviously the one on 18 is going to get a lot of the fame, but that birdie putt he made on the par 5 that got him
just
to
barely tapped the ball and it goes like 30 feet.
Yeah, so that was great. And you had John Rahm sitting there. He had finished a long time ago, but he was the clubhouse leader at 4 over. And
for a while, I was like, is he?
You had a lot of guys that had a chance to keep it at 3, and then they would bogey and end up going to 5, and then you have Scotty Scheffler who. I mean, the way the leaderboard is falling, he's playing with his C game.
If he could make a putt,
if he could have made a putt, he has a good chance. And so it was full of drama. Loved it. It was very, very enjoyable tournament.
Yeah.
It's J.J. Spaun now almost a lock to be on the U.S. Ryder Cup team. And if you're, a fan of the U.S. team, you got a guy who is great, strokes tee to green.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the only reasons why I picked him.
Yep.
Pretty dang good putter too.
Yeah, and he can do it under pressure.
Under pressure. So, I think for him too, learning from the players where he lost in that playoff,
which he said, by the way, in his to the media
served
after.
him well, and having the weather delay and how to handle it, because once that weather delay came, it's like a switch.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden he started playing the golf. We saw him playing on Thursday and Friday again.
Yep.
Really good tournament. And as for your and I picks,
oh gosh,
before we get to a quick little. What's in the bag here? I won. I don't have the final score, but it's mostly because I had Spaun.
Yeah, you won.
I think I was in the second swing pool, I was like 50th place, but that's because I had 2 guys that missed the cut. I think you had 2 or 3 guys. Yeah.
I had 4 guys miss the cut. I was 2 for 6, and the only 2 I had that made it were Koepka and MacIntyre.
Yeah.
MacIntyre did pretty well, but I had Bryson miss the cut. I had Minwoo Lee miss the cut. Justin Rose missed the cut, and then Gary Woodland actually had a solid start, but then struggled after the first probably 10 or 12 holes he played.
Yeah, I had JT Justin Thomas missed the cut, and then I had Bud Cauley, and he was 1 over through 27 holes, and I was like, perfect. I just need Nick Taylor to make the cut, and we're good. Nick Taylor did his job, and then Bud Cauley just ran into a buzzsaw and went 8 over on his final 9 holes, including a double bogey to miss.
Yeah, it's actually wild how frequent that happened, where guys had. Like I'm thinking of James Nicholas, who was that he had some status on Corn Ferry. He went through qualifying to get his spot, and he was like tied for 7th or something after 18 holes, and then he shot a 45 on his first 9 Friday, and all of a sudden he was going to miss the cut. Grinded with a 33, I think, on his second 9 to make it. If you look at his score outside of those 9 holes on Friday, he was probably going to be in the lead. So just how often those mistakes can compound at Oakmont was fun to watch. I mean, you saw Shane Lowry go like 78, 79 or something like that.
Yeah. Well, and I think on one of our social media giveaways, it was for Friday's round. It was what's going to be the high score, and I think it was an 89.
There was an 89. Yep. There was. I can't remember his name, but somebody who shot 86 and 89.
So we'll be going through the submissions.
I'd be surprised if someone
today
shot
and tomorrow, but
guessed 89.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if someone guessed the name. 19 over, I don't know. I mean, you saw a bunch of 14 and 15 overs the first day. And But anyways, let's do a quick look into J.J. Spaun's What's in the Bag. Of course, we're going to have much more with Jake Montgomery here, so he kind of gives you the fitting insights into each of these clubs. But A lot of brands. He goes GT3 Driver, TaylorMade Qi10 Fairway Woods, Srixon ZXi 5, ZXi 7 combos, irons. Has 3 different Cleveland wedges, RTX Zip Core, RTZ, RTX 6 Zip Core. And then he goes with the L.A.B DF3, first major win for L.A.B golf. And his specs on his L.A.B putter is playing at 34 inches long, lie angles at 70 degrees. He plays the TPT L.A.B golf shaft, 2 degrees of shaft lean, and then he has the G alignment marking. So if you go onto our website, you go to Labs, you can go look at all the different alignments. And then he actually has a Scotty Cameron black Pistolini grip on there. So that's kind of a funny touch, but so those are the specs on his putter there.
Yeah, that's as we talked about with Jake, that's more than likely a feel thing, because I know the way L.A.B engineers, the standard and stock grips that you can get, it's based on that onset or that the way that there's kind of that shaft lean with these putters. But nonetheless, it was a great week for L.A.B, and I think maybe the casual golfer has been introduced to L.A.B, and you've seen the putters on TV or you've seen players using them, and you're still kind of maybe unfamiliar with the whole purpose of the company. But now you've got J.J. Spaun winning a major with it. He drops a 64-foot putt to win it in dramatic fashion with the putter, throws the putter. And I saw a joke made on X that the face was still balanced as he threw the putter.
Still up.
But then you also had Adam Scott in contention all weekend as well, using his was he using a
he has the
Mez
kind of
Max?
the sweeper Mez Max,
the sweeper. So suddenly now it's L.A.B is going to be on the forefront of everybody's mind, and the casual golfer I think has a lot more education now, and they can. Again, because L.A.B doesn't sponsor any players. If a player's using their putter, it's because it works for them. And so you see that with Spaun this week, and I think you're going to see a lot more wins for L.A.B here in the future.
Yeah, and a lot of these clubs, L.A.B DF3, you got the Srixon ZXi, Titleist GT3. These are also Fitters' Choice winners for us. Really good putters, really good clubs. But why are they working? What makes these irons stand out? What are kind of the types of players that these work for? That's something that I know that you talked with Jake here.
Yeah, it was cool to talk with Jake about that and get his insights, because he's been working with golfers of all skill levels in the fitting bays all year with all of these products. And then he actually made a note too that I loved about the Qi10 Fairway Woods, that they were super popular last year, and I know even Kevin Kraft had high remarks about those last year. To see those still in the bags of players, and obviously we talk about Scotty and Rory still playing a lot of Qi10 stuff. So clearly something clicked with TaylorMade for those. But again, the ZXi 7 irons, as someone who plays them, I love that. Spaun won with them. So pretty good stuff here from Jake, talking about the clubs that Spaun used, and then maybe a couple others at the end there that we talk about with the winning clubs at the U.S. Open. All right, we now welcome on the Second Swing Thoughts podcast, Jake Montgomery. You know who he is, fitting manager at the Minneapolis store. Jake, we're recording this right after the playing of the U.S. Open, so we got to talk through the winner's bag a little bit. And I think it's one of my favorite bags on tour, because J.J. Spaun, thrilling win, but he's got a mix of brands in there that's pretty cool. And I think what we always try to preach Second Swing is, for the most part, a player should have multiple brands in the bag to get like peak performance. And so to see him kind of with a wide variety is pretty cool. Just from, overall, from what you know about his bag, his game, and obviously how he played, what are your thoughts on J.J. Spaun and what he's playing?
Yeah, I love to see a player have multiple brands in the bag. Especially, I always tell people, if you're not being paid by the manufacturer, there's no reason you should have every club in your bag be one brand.
Yeah.
There's just so many clubs out there that offer a variety of performance benefits that, again, you really should not have the same brand all the way through. Before I started working for Second Swing, I did. I had the same brand all the way, just liked one in particular and just kind of kept it that way. Kind of came in, learned what fitting was, and realized, maybe that's not the smartest decision. And now I have 5 different brands in my golf bag right now.
Yeah.
So seeing a variety of brands in there is a very good thing. I'm not shocked to see at the top of the bag that Titleist GT3.
Yeah.
One of the fastest drivers out right now, especially guys at PGA Tour level speeds. They need something that's going to help reduce that spin rate, which is why that GT3 has been as popular. But we also see a lot of GT2s out there as well. Typically what I'm finding, if a high level player is coming in, they usually can play either option as long as spin isn't really high. But the GT3 is a little easier to shape. So if you have a player that really likes to kind of turn one over, play kind of a heel fader, it's a little easier to do that with that driver.
Yeah, I think we saw that from Spaun. You know, obviously he hit probably two of the most impressive tee shots of his career right when he needed to there. 17, the short par 4, almost hitting the pin, rolling 15 feet by, setting up that birdie. And then 18, you know, he's got the one-shot lead, at the time, one-shot lead. Needs to hit the fairway, and he just hits that perfect, butter fade down the middle. And it seems like that's his go-to shot, and the GT3 allows him to do that. He's also got Fujikura Ventus Black Velocore Plus 6X shaft in there. Another one that I'm sure that we've done a bunch of content on, and why that family is super successful there. Getting into his Fairway Woods now. This is another different brand. So he's got two TaylorMade Qi10. This is the standard model, not the tour. And the 3-wood at 15 degrees, 5-wood at 18 degrees, and it looks like in both he's got the Mitsubishi Diamana, the PD 70 and 80 TX. Thoughts on those? I think there's the Qi10 family. I feel like had a really good feedback and results, and from our fitters just on the Fairway Wood family. There seems like they're pretty solid.
Yeah, I mean, especially on tour, that core Qi10 model fairway was so popular. I mean, you saw so many guys that were sponsored to play a certain brand of clubs, but they would sneak that 3-wood in. I think a lot of players just kind of like the way that it looked and kind of set up at address is just very clean.
Yeah.
But it performed really, really well. I mean, when I'd had customers in, it was very fast. It got very high in the air, and it was really forgiving on a miss. Like you could hit a toe ball, hit a heel shot, and the spin rate wouldn't fluctuate a crazy amount, which, I mean, especially at their level, they're just looking for something that's going to give them the same performance every time, which is why I think, again, that Qi10 fairway has been so popular.
And I think there's something to be said, too, about, you mentioned how popular that was on tour, for guys to, at that level with their speed, still play something that is, quote unquote, a core model, or a forgiving model of a 3-wood or a 5-wood. To see that is kind of strange in a good way for TaylorMade. I think it's also worth noting that, I think the one thing that maybe fitters were a little bit, I don't want to say frustrated by, but the one knock on these was that at the time, or they weren't adjustable, or they're not adjustable, right? So in the fitting, it made it a little difficult for you to get that into the hands of maybe everyday players sometimes. Obviously on tour, these guys can get it built however they need to have it built. But now the Qi35 series does have that adjustability. But yeah, really good to see Qi10 in there again. And as you said, I think a lot of these tour player contracts, some of them have full 14 clubs where they're playing, right? As you mentioned, some have, I think you can kind of, pick up some context clues from Spaun, with the Srixon hat he's wearing, right? That he's probably, got maybe irons and wedges, but then he leaves the rest open to whatever works best. And so you saw that scenario work for Qi10 and a lot of tour players out there as well. Combo set for the irons here. We get into that Srixon set, and we got to just get your feedback on, in general, the ZXi family of irons, because he's playing them. It's more or less exactly what I'm playing as well. I have actually a ZXi 7 4-iron, and he's got the ZXi 5. But the Dynamic Gold Tour Issue X100s. Your thoughts on that setup there? It's probably a pretty popular one.
That's a combo that I probably don't go a week without selling.
Yeah.
ZXi 7s with X100s. I mean, both of those options are extremely popular, especially X100 shaft. I mean, that's kind of the, no pun intended, the gold standard for an extra stiff shaft when it comes to irons. But the ZXi family as a whole is just so, I just keep saying it, consistent. That's what these tour players are looking for. They don't want spin and ball speed to fluctuate a lot because they want to know exactly how far a certain club is going to go.
Right.
I would say the ZXi 7 is the most forgiving, consistent club that I have seen. The smaller in club head size that you go, the more consistent it is out of the middle. That's why you see guys on the tour playing MBs,
right,
and why guys on Sundays are playing G430s that are just a lot bigger, deep, hollow cavity.
Yeah.
But the problem with those more forgiving irons is they're less predictable on a well-struck shot. So for a tour player, they might have 5 yards of variance between each shot. And for that, it's unacceptable. But for an average Joe like us, where we don't hit it out of the middle every time, we need something that's going to bring our miss hits a lot closer to our good shots. The ZXi 7 especially is such a good combination of both of those. I mean, I have fit 15 handicaps into ZXi 7s, at least in the lower portion of the bag, where even if we're not hitting it perfect, we're still seeing pretty good ball speed from it, but it's not crazy jumpy. And that's not to say that it's not a hot iron. It's just not going to all of a sudden go 20 yards past the shot that you just hit. And then having the ZXi 5 4-iron in there, that I think is just probably more of a peak height play. The ZXi 5 has a lower center of gravity, which helps launch the ball higher. A little bit faster ball speed from it as well will just, again, kind of achieve more peak height. Yeah. And oftentimes I'm kind of going to that split set just for more ball speed reasons as well, where for the average player, we want to see about 5 miles per hour gap in ball speed between each club. For some players, once we get into the 6, 5, 4, that can get a little closer to 4 or 3 miles an hour. We're kind of getting a little bunched together. Putting that hotter, bigger iron in the top just kind of helps build that gap back up.
Right. And then for him, obviously, making sure that gap between, say, his, the ZXi 7 5-iron and then the 5 wood that he's got, making sure that whatever club is in there is right in between and fills the gap perfectly. And for him, it was a ZXi 5 4-iron. And as someone who plays ZXi 7, it's actually kind of cool to see Spaun win. But I also, to your point, ZXi 7 is not the smallest iron out there. If you need like a super thin top line and a thin sole, ZXi 7 probably isn't for you if that's all you're looking for. But ZXi 7 delivers in the performance. The new forging process they have, I think it gives it really soft feel. And yeah, it's forgiving. It's consistent for the category that it's in. I'm not surprised to see that iron has success. It's had a bunch of other wins this year as well. Guys like Sepp Straka winning with them. So kudos to Srixon. They've really, since the original ZX series, I feel like they've been among the elite in terms of irons that you've seen in the fitting bay.
100%. I mean, I would dare to say I think they might be my most sold iron brands since that came out. Because, I mean, they just span the whole kind of player category so well. I would say, Ping has definitely kind of improved that area with the release of their new blueprint line. They have definitely gotten more into that kind of high-level portion of the bag. I mean, they will always dominate the more forgiving side of things. Yeah. They've come a long way there, but just as far as spanning all styles of golfer, Srixon really has a club for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, diving into Spaun's wedges, and he's got a little bit of a unique build out with the wedges, and I guess the question I'll have for you after here, I'll just dive into what he's got. Cleveland RTX Zip Core with his gap wedge, 50 degree. Then he's got a Cleveland RTZ, which is their new model, in his 54 degree. Then the RTX 6 Zip Core with a 60 degree. Just in general, on building your set of wedges as the same model throughout versus something like this that might have a couple different ones in there. What is your perspective on that? Is there a better way? Is having all of them the same better? Is it okay to mix it up the way? I mean, obviously for Spaun it works, and he's got them built, specifically for him. But for the average player coming in for a fitting, how would you go about that discussion?
I mean, I would say for the average player, the only reason I'm really doing that is maybe they last year bought a sandwich they really like, and this year they want to get some new clubs. Like let's say they bought an SM9 last year, and they want to come in and get new wedges for the 56 and for the 50 and the 60. Yeah. And they have some very specific specifications they need to get to: length, lie angle, shaft, where we'd have to order something. Okay. That'd be the only reason that I would put someone into, I would say, different wedges across the board. If I had to guess why he's doing it, I think it probably just comes down to feel. Yeah. Especially with wedges. I mean, that's such an important component of this. Your 50 degree, that's a lot of partial shots where you're kind of holding stuff off. You really just need it to be comfortable. Same thing with a 60. That's a wedge that you need to replace the most, but once you find a wedge you like, it's really hard to get rid of. Yep. So that would be kind of my assumption as to why he's playing an older model. And then kind of in that sandwich playing the new RTZ. That could be as well that that's the wedge he uses the most. Yeah. Wears down the grooves the most. Needs to get something new in there. Right. But yeah, for higher end players, usually we're just kind of seeing that they just really like what they were in, and they don't want to see a change in that part of the bag. Yeah, actually, on that note, we recently were on the Ping Tour truck, and we kind of did a video on our channel about some of the wedge builds for those guys. Specifically, we were with Matt Kistler, one of the guys on the truck, and he went through the wedge builds of their L.A.B wedge or 60 degree for Hovland, Finau, and Harris English, and two of them were actually playing a Glide 2.0 still. And so they were able to build those out still because those guys were like, this is the wedge I got to play. Yeah. And it's because they're so used to it, right? They know the feel. They have a certain expectation of how it's going to perform. And so that's, again, similar to probably when you see guys using older wedge models, you see a lot of SM8s still in play from a few years ago.
probably that reason there. All right, so now I know this is for you probably the most exciting part of Spaun's bag, the putter. So this zero torque movement, it keeps chugging along. It's not slowing down. I know in terms of fittings in the stores, in terms of we could talk sales, we could talk just popularity in general, but now L.A.B has a major championship under its belt in terms of being used on tour. Spaun had the L.A.B DF3 in the bag. I know you have one that you will play with. So give me your thoughts on the L.A.B DF3 and I guess how this might help as well with this movement that, again, doesn't appear to be slowing down.
Yeah, I mean, I've played a DF3 for the better part of a year now, and I can safely say it is the best putter I've ever had. Putting has always been an area of golf that I have struggled with. Now, this is going to be a very personal testimony. You need to try it for yourself.
Yeah.
But anything inside 10 feet, like my buddies knew, there was a pretty good chance I was not making it. And it was just all mental. And then I tried everything. I went to a Jailbird last year. I had a Scotty Cameron blade before that. I had a TaylorMade Spider before that. Trust me, I tried everything. And I got a DF3 in my bag, and just something about it, like I can't explain it. It just feels like it's on rails. Like it's kind of guided throughout the whole stroke. And I mean, that's just kind of the zero torque feel. You see more and more players kind of being open to this style of putter. It's not the prettiest thing in the world. Like I'm not afraid to admit that.
Yeah. Well, that's the fun thing is L.A.B, the CEO, we had an interview with him, I think a year and a half ago now at this point, and he said the same thing. He's like, yeah, our putter's probably ugly to a lot of people, but it works. It's kind of the
100%.
idea. So if you can get over that look, which I think you're at that point now, and it works for you.
Absolutely. I mean, within a week or so, it just started to look normal to me. Like you kind of get over that look, but it really just helps keep the face square to your path. And that's where most players' misses are coming from. We use TrackMan at our Minneapolis location, and face angle is pretty much the number one thing I'm focusing on throughout a putter fig. I want to try and get that consistent and stable. If it's half degree closed every time, great. Play that. We don't need to change that. But if it's half open, 1 degree closed, 2 open, like just kind of jumping around, that's where you just have no idea where this kind of putt is coming off the face. In my experience fitting L.A.B putters, that is the number one area where they excel is face angle stability. It just makes it so much easier to keep that face square when it's not kind of moving on. You don't feel that torque in your hands quite as much. It usually does take players probably 5-10 putts to kind of get used to using something that's center shafted and has onset, where they've just never seen anything like that before. But when you can get over it, it's really, really, really useful.
So, and speaking on the onset part, we also have to bring up Spaun's, the unique part about his L.A.B putter specifically is if, you look closely, the L.A.B DF3s have a stock sort of grip to them that are, I guess, I don't know how you describe it, but they sort of, add to or they're designed for the onset, right? Yep. So, but his doesn't have that. And so I guess from that perspective, how does he adjust his setup to make up for that? Or I guess what is he, because he has it's a Scotty Cameron grip on his L.A.B DF3.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's about 2 degrees of shaft lean on that putter.
Yeah.
The way that a lot of players kind of address that is he just kind of presses his hands a little bit more forward to kind of counteract for it. We do have one fitter that uses one that has just a normal super stroke grip on there. And what he did actually is he left it slightly closed because he felt that when it was square on, it was sitting very open.
Okay.
So he closed the grip up a hair so he can press a little bit, and then it just kind of lines up square. So I don't know how he has his grip aligned by any means like that, but there are some fun things you can do with these putters grip-wise. You can re-grip them and it doesn't throw the balance off too much as long as we're not putting like a counterbalance plug in the top of that or something like that. But I think he just really likes the feel of a smaller grip, and
he also
doesn't
has
necessarily
crosshand,
like that
so there's
offset
maybe some level of press there, or something like that he's counteracting it with. But the first major win for L.A.B, and that movement will continue. I imagine there will be some more major wins where that came from. You're seeing a lot more guys on tour, a lot more big names, at least trying it out, putting it in the bag, whether it's a L.A.B or you've seen the Spider 5K ZT in a lot of players' bags as well. It's another popular one. So what I'm going to go through here is kind of the rest of the top 4, so to speak, and just a couple unique clubs from each. I wanted to highlight specifically from Robert MacIntyre, who finished second. What a weekend for him, going under par both Saturday and Sunday. He's playing as of earlier this year was playing a TaylorMade Aero Burner 3-wood.
Yep.
And then Viktor Hovland, I know he's been doing all kinds of testing with the new G440 stuff. He's still playing a G425 LST and Ping I210 iron.
Yeah.
So just on those clubs particular, is there like, have you seen, in terms of any use fittings that you've done or getting players into something that might be more budget friendly, some success with any of those models? I know maybe the Aero Burner is even old enough where it's like we don't have a ton of those.
Yeah,
but
I mean, honestly, I can't tell you the last time I probably bought an Aero Burner to a fitting. The 425, I still, if I'm doing a used driver fitting, it's almost always in there. I mean, it all depends on budget. We might try 430, but it's such a forgiving driver still that, I mean, there are so many players that could benefit. If you don't want to go out and buy a $650 driver, spend $3 and just get yourself into something that's going to work better for you. Absolutely get fit for it. But I mean, again, for both those guys, I think it just kind of comes down to they're very comfortable with that model, especially with that Aero Burner. I mean, the only reason I think he's still playing that is he just feels so comfortable and confident with it in the bag.
Yeah.
I mean, TaylorMade has made better fairway woods since then. I mean, even just the sim would be significantly better from a performance standpoint. But I think he knows what it's going to do every time he hits it, and that's kind of like why he's still playing it.
I wonder if that's the only white club head left
still on tour.
It might be. I
can't think of any.
Can't think of anyone right now. Yeah. And then lastly, I wanted to get to Cam Young's bag. So Cameron Young, he's had probably, I would say, the end of last year, maybe the beginning of this year was kind of had some struggles, but it looks like he's found his game. A couple really good finishes here, back-to-back weeks. He shot also did not go over par on the weekend. His only over par round actually for the week was on Friday. He has a GT2 driver and then the GT280. This is actually as of April. So I may have made a tweak or two for the U.S. Open, but nonetheless, GT280 in the bag. And then his iron set combo, I have to bring up because I know we talk about blending irons together. We talk about how maybe playing multiple models throughout your set can be advantageous. Titleist U505 3 iron, Titleist T200 4 iron, T100 5 iron, and then he's got a prototype set of like muscle back blades, the Titleist 631 CY for his 639 iron. So he's got 4 different irons in his bag. Have you ever done that for a customer? I mean, I'm sure 3 is probably the most that you've done.
I haven't gone to 4. I have done 3. Actually, it was with Titleist. We went T200 4 iron, T150 5 through 6, and then T100 the rest of the way down. I mean, that's not like a crazy splits. I mean, it's a lot of different iron types in there. But having 4, that's a lot. For him, I think it's all just about windows, if I had to guess. At his speed, I would imagine he swings down on it like crazy.
Yeah.
Just to kind of fight the ball down. And with doing that, again, you might need stuff with a little bigger sole, a little lower center of gravity to kind of launch the ball up. I know Titleist is also really big on, they want all irons to peak at the same height. That's why they're so big into split sets.
Right.
And honestly, the training I did out at TPI was extremely helpful for me as far as bringing stuff back and knowing how to split set stuff going forward. So that would kind of be my hypothesis as to why he's doing that.
Yeah, I know they, in the last few generations of the T series, they've always made the irons so that they can blend really well. Like that's a big part of their development process with that. And then lastly, we talked about mini drivers a little bit. I mean, Cam was playing one, but there was a lot in play. Hitting the fairway at Oakmont was so important. Yep. And Adam Scott has been notorious. He was playing a L.A.B putter, but he's been notorious for kind of as an equipment free agent right now, just kind of like playing what he needs to play. Yeah. And one of those this week was an R7 quad mini driver. We saw a few more of those in play. I think Justin Rose played one. I saw Tommy Fleetwood had one in the bag. Just quickly, your thoughts on the R7 quad and how that is playing itself out in fitting bays. I imagine it's been pretty successful. That was my favorite of the mini drivers this year.
I mean, I would say that's kind of the one that's, I think, head and shoulders above the rest right now. It's really good off the ground still. I mean, it's a bigger head size than the 280, but you can still get it up in the air pretty easy. And honestly, it spins surprisingly well off the ground. But off the tee is where it's a freaking rocket launcher. Especially for weirdly slower players. I've had a lot of success where I can loft that thing up to 15 degrees and it just stays in the air forever. Where, I mean, we might lose a half a mile an hour club head speed from going to a shorter shaft. But when they're swinging at 65 miles an hour, that's not really my worry there is club head speed. But when we can keep the ball in the air, that's when we get carry. That's when we get total distance. Because, I mean, again, most of these players, they're swinging slow enough that we're not really worried about spin either. It's just really just keep the ball in the air.
Yeah.
So I've had a lot of success with it on that end, and then obviously like your higher speed bike guys that are just looking for a driver that just doesn't go as far and go straighter. I had one guy come in. He's the fastest player I've ever fit. He was hitting at about 340. And what we did was we actually took the 13-gram weights out of another head and put them all into one head, just making that thing as heavy as possible. Wow. And then I got him an 80-gram extra stiff 7-wood shaft and threw it in there. And he was just hitting that thing on a rope.
A 7-wood shaft?
Yeah. So it was playing about 42 inches with a lot of head weight.
Wow, yeah, that's the cool thing you can do with the R7 quad too. Is you have those 4 weight ports that you can get really funky with.
Yep.
If you have a heavy slice tendency, you could throw a bunch in the heel and get creative with it. So, but yeah, that was kind of a fun look because JJ Spaun, very very impressive win, and he's been playing some great golf. So, a really dramatic finish. That was really cool to see, but also cool to get your perspective on the clubs here, Jake. So, thanks for stopping in. Make sure you go schedule a fitting with Jake or someone at any of our stores to get yourself dialed in for some of these clubs. Thanks again, Jake.
No problem.
And that was Jake Montgomery talking about some of the clubs in play at the U.S. Open, specifically J.J. Spaun winning the U.S. Open. Cool to get his perspective on those. And, the combo set piece is also an important one, I think, in that even me, I'm not playing a ZXi 5, but now I'm almost like, maybe I should if J.J. Spaun is using one for his 4-iron versus a whole set of ZXi 7s. But, really cool. It's cool to see how that stuff at the top level of the game can translate to the fitting bays rather quickly and easily if you get that discussion going with Jake.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you and I were both big fans of JJ's bag because some of our clubs are in that bag.
Yes.
I got the driver and one of my Cleveland RTZ wedges. You have the Srixon Irons. Neither one of us has the L.A.B putter, but I don't know. There's something I just think down the road you're going to be getting into one of those.
You're probably not wrong. I have been, making some changes and adjustments with the putter lately. The Jailbird last year was great on the short putts. I felt like I was hitting really good putts, but the lag putting with the size and the weight was just a little much. So maybe the L.A.B is the option. Maybe something like the way Spawn's got it built is the right play. I like what I'm using right now, but again, I'm starting to become a Kevin Kraft a little bit. I don't know if I like that putter.
That's not the part of being like Kevin Kraft you want to be.
Right.
Being a really good golfer qualifying for all these U.S. Opens, absolutely.
Yeah.
But 13 putters in a year, I don't know.
Yeah, I know. I'd like to not have that for my wallet's sake, but, I'm hoping I can taper that down eventually here.
Yeah, but awesome stuff from Jake. Really appreciate him coming in. He's always great on the show. Always has, great examples of players he's fit to kind of help, tell the story. So we really appreciate Jake. And I know he's on our YouTube channel plenty. What else do we got coming up here in the next week or so?
So we've got really good stuff coming. And I think what I'm excited about is that we filmed some content testing specific builds that actually players on tour use. Scotty Scheffler's 7-wood, which he's used to win tournaments and done so. I mean, it's been really cool. He's kind of flipped this 3-iron versus a 7-wood in the bag, and then he's used the Qi10 Qi35 7-wood, and we tested that build out. We've got John Rahm's Fairway Wood build, which he's got a very unique club head that is shaped very differently. So that's a fun one to tune in for. That'll be on the YouTube channel here soon. Then also we're wrapping up our Live at Lunch series where we kind of test old versus new drivers. We're going to Cobra this week. If you haven't seen any of the other brands, they're on the YouTube channel. We did them live. We've done, we went to TaylorMade, Titleist, Ping, Callaway, and now we're at Cobra. So this should be a fun one to see how far the technology's advanced over 20-some years. So, and we're traveling today down south to get some content that will be on the YouTube channel in several weeks.
Nice. Yeah, okay. Looking forward to watching all of that. On the Second Swing side, of course, we got our best value clubs.
Yes.
Speaking of Srixon, if you maybe the ZXIs are a little, maybe that's a little outside your budget. Well, we have a great selection of, the Mark IIs, right?
Yep.
Which were a fantastic iron. If you, speaking of Cobra drivers, we have a great selection of Cobra dark speed drivers. Just got my brother-in-law into one. The guy who barely golfs couldn't text me enough about his driver. So make sure you check out, our best value sections, whether online or in store. There are a lot of great clubs, pretty recent releases. They're just going at great value. So really good options.
Yeah, I mean, Father's Day, if you got some sort of gift card or some store credit there to use, and you need a new driver, want to do drive. I mean, the dark speed deal is unbelievable.
It's unbelievable.
So the value of those right now, you got to
$240
at least
for a
try
brand new
it out.
driver.
At
It's
least
like
try it out. I
cheap.
mean, if you got like a $50 gift card, then you already get a further discount already on a driver that has a really, really good price on it.
Yeah, absolutely awesome. Well, anyways, that wraps up this episode. So, as Drew always says, make sure you hit that subscribe button here on the YouTube channel, and also subscribe to us on all of your whichever podcast platform you use. We are available on all of those. So, hit that subscribe button. And Drew, thanks for another great show.
Yeah, we'll see everybody next week.